Hello, my name is Leydi Seoane, and in this video we're going to derive the Pythagorean triplets formula. From the Pythagorean formula, x squared plus y squared equals c squared. And we're going to do some algebraic manipulations to do that. First, we're going to subtract x squared in both sides of this equation here to solve for y squared. When we subtract x squared in both sides, we get that y squared equals c squared minus x squared. In the following step, we divide both sides by y squared. When we do that, we obtain that 1 equals to c squared minus x squared over y squared. But note here that c squared minus x squared is a difference of squares. So we're going to proceed to factor it. When we factor this difference of squares, we obtain 1 equals to c plus x times c minus x, all of that over y squared. But we can also note here that y squared is the same as y times y. So we can also factor the denominator. When we factor the denominator, we can see that 1 equals to c plus x over one of those y's times c minus x over the other y. And we can further simplify this equation. Let's note here that this y is a simple common denominator to c and x, and this other y is a common denominator to this c and to this x. So we can break this into 1 equals to this part here is going to be c over y plus x over y. And this part here is going to be c over y minus x over y. It's important to observe that each of these factors are rational numbers. Now, since the product of these two here is 1, as you can see, let's do something. We're going to let this factor equals to m over n, and this other factor to n over m. Why are we doing this? Well, m over n times n over m is equal to 1. We simplify this n with this n and this m with this m, and we get 1. So when we do this, we are saying that m over n equals to this and n over m equals to this. Now let's remember here that m and n are positive integers. If we take these two equations and add them here, m over n equals c over y plus x over y, and n over m equals c over y minus x over y. If we add them, m over n plus n over m right here, and c over y plus c over y, we'll get 2c over y. But these two cancel out. So we are left with m over n plus n over m equals to 2cy. In the next step, we are going to multiply these fractions on the left side by m over m, this left fraction, we're going to multiply by m over m, and this right fraction, we're going to multiply by n over n. And let's see what happens. We obtain here this m times this m is m squared. This n times this n is n squared. And we got a common denominator, which is mn. So we get that n squared plus n squared over mn equals to what we already had, which is 2c over y. Next, we're going to get this here, and we're going to divide both sides of this equation by 2. So we can get rid of these 2 here. When we divide both sides of the equation by 2, in here, we get that this here, we get that is equal to m squared plus n squared over 2mn. And when we divide by 2 in the sides, we get rid of these 2, obtaining this over here. We get that c over y equals to m squared plus n squared over 2mn. But in here we can see what we're seeing here. We can see that c equals to m squared plus n squared, and y equals to 2mn. So in here we already have 2 expressions, one of c and one of y, in terms of m and n. So we get that c equals to m squared plus n squared, and y equals to 2mn. Now we're going to look for x. But from before, here, when we let m over n equals to c over y plus x over y, we're going to use this equation here. And we're going to use the results that we just obtained, these 2 results here, substitute it in there, and solve for x, and see what x equals to in terms of m and n. So what we have is that for that, we're going to solve for y. From this equation, we subtract c over y, and we get that x over y equals to m over n minus c over y. When we substitute c and y in terms of m and n here, we obtain that z is equal to m squared plus n squared, and y is equal to 2mn. So we substitute those here, and we obtain this. X over y equals to m over n minus m squared plus n squared, which is z, over 2mn, which is y. We proceed to solve this subtraction here. So the common denominator here is 2mn. We get here 2m squared minus, between the parentheses, m squared plus n squared. But in the next step, we are going to distribute this negative here. When we distribute this negative, we get that x over y equals to 2m squared minus m squared minus n squared over 2mn. When we subtract this here, this numerator here, we get that x equals to m squared minus n squared, and y down here equals to 2mn, which we already know. So we have obtained x in terms of m and n, which is what we want. So we have that x equals m squared minus n squared. In conclusion, we have derived the Pythagorean triplets formula. We obtain that c equals to m squared plus n squared, y equals to 2mn, and x equals to m squared minus n squared. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned from it.